Hello, welcome everyone. My name is Alex Weiser. I'm the Director of Public Programs here at the YIVO Institute for Jewish Research. So thrilled to have you all here for this book launch event. As many of you know, YIVO is a wonderful library and archive of Jewish materials, of Jewish history and Jewish culture. We have about 23 million documents in our collection and over 400,000 books. And scholars and journalists and musicians and creative people come from all around the world to use our materials for their work. And we are just always so thrilled when that work results in new books out in the world, new music out in the world. And that's what we're here to celebrate tonight, this afternoon. So thank you all so much for joining us for this. We're very excited. We have Vivi Lax here today, and we're celebrating the launch of her new book, Whitechapel Noise: Jewish Immigrant Life in Yiddish Song and Verse, London, 1884 to 1914. I won't say much more. I'm going to hand it over to Vivi now. Please join me in welcoming Vivi Lax.
Thank you very much, Alex. And I'm thrilled to be back here. I was here 5 years ago researching this book, so I'm really thrilled to be back here launching it and telling you a bit about it, although some of what I'm telling you about wasn't the bit of the book that I researched here, but it's all one big picture. But before I go any further, I'm going to tell you a bit, before I go any further, I'm going to tell you a bit about myself, and then before I do that, I'm going to ask you, how many people have come to this talk because of this word, Whitechapel? Yes. How many people have come because of these words, So, you won't be disappointed. Thank you very much. No, it's not on the board though. So, my name is Vivi Lax, and I'm a historian, I'm a teacher, I'm a performer, I call myself a Yiddish pop singer, and I lead tours of the Jewish East End, and someone in Britain called me once in writing a Yiddish cultural activist. And I rather like that. But what I'm going to talk to you about today is I'm going to start off telling you a little bit generally about the book, and then we'll look in more detail at this particular subject. So this is the book, and the book is in two sections. The first section is a historical context, so that you know when you look at the songs and the poetry and stuff in the book, you know what you're talking about. And the two areas of history, the first one is labour, work, sweating system, and in particular, the socialists and how the socialists used poetry as a strategy to get their message across. And poetry, because poetry at the time in Ganson, the totality of it, was written in rhyming couplets, or coupletten. Okay? And the second history is a history of the Anglo-Yiddish music hall, sometimes rather sort of like called the Cockney-Yiddish music hall, whether Cockney is actually the right word for it, but it's stuck as a name. And that is a brand new history that hasn't been written about before. A small amount has been written about the Yiddish theatre, and in Yiddish, and deciphering those texts and bringing them back has been a complete joy. The second part of the book is an analysis of all these coupletten, and I found 400 coupletten in this 30-year period in newspapers, in magazines, in periodicals, in pamphlets, in theatre programmes, on song sheets, in songbooks, so all sorts of different places. Out of those 400, I was interested, as a historian, in the ones that particularly concerned me about Britain. And that was 300 texts. So I'm left with these 300 texts, and it's huge, and it covers everything. It covers work, and it covers mobility, and it covers migration, and it covers politics. It's just so wide. So I chose politics, sex, and religion as my major themes, and then realized that there were some big overarching themes that cut across everything. And one of these was Anglicization, the real desire to become English, both sort of pushed onto the immigrants and by the immigrants themselves. And a lot of what I talk about, you'll probably notice similar things in New York. And the second big theme was transnationalism. That is, even if I'll talk to you about a song that's directly about London, you'll see that it's actually connected to a much wider Yiddish-speaking world. So, let me just see if I've missed anything out of that. So here's a picture of some of the song sheets that I found. The Londoner Coupletist tells us there are 150 pages and 100 songs. In fact, there's about 102 songs in there. They couldn't count. And they couldn't count because actually what it is it's a whole load of pamphlets put together into a book, which was very common at the time. We've got song sheets. You can see here this rather fragile song sheet was found in the National Library of Israel in Jerusalem. Some of the song sheets are from private collectors. This is a theatre programme. You can't quite see it at the top. It's a music hall called, can anyone read that with those chops? Yeah, shout that out. York Minster. The York, they didn't go for little names. The York Minster is a great big cathedral in York. And these are a Wojciech up to date and the Het of the Aget from this journal here. One thing to say that it's quite interesting because I found amongst these 100 texts, or 300 texts, 80 music hall songs. No, I lied. There are 200 music hall songs in all that I found. 80 were about London, and about 50 of them mention sex. Sex before marriage, sex in marriage, sex out of marriage, sexual abuse, prostitution, domestic violence, the difficulty of relationships. But one of the reasons that it's such a big number is that the way that the music hall songs are structured is that you have a chorus, and the chorus gives you the message. And then you have some verses, and the verses say something to the message. So you could have a song where the message is about, and the money disappears. This is how the money disappears. And then you've got one about people squandering their money, and you've got one about young men spending it all on young women, and you've got another one, whatever. So you'll find in one song, you can't say, this is a song just about one subject. It's often about more of them than that. Okie dokie. So I'm going to have a look at, this is actually the front cover of the book, although they couldn't get very much of it on the front cover. And this is Wentworth Street. Wentworth Street, some of you might be familiar with the name Petticoat Lane. So Petticoat Lane is a market in the East End of London. It's that sort of Middlesex Street, but the whole area tends to be called Petticoat Lane. Petticoat Lane isn't one street. And this is Wentworth Street, and this is a picture from 1897. And it's a market where everybody is chattering and talking, and they're talking about politics, and they're talking about decline of religion, and they're talking about all sorts of things. They're talking about work and the strikes that are going on, and how hard it is to keep the demands. And they're also talking about sex. So what are they saying about sex? Well, you see these two girls over here. I think, you see, they went last night to the Yiddish music hall. And the Levenweir brothers have got a new song out. So, well, Rochel thinks Manny is the cutest Levenweir brother. But Chipper thinks that she's wrong. She thinks it's Alex. So that's what they're discussing. So what else have we got? Well, actually, there's a couple of guys tucked away over there you can't really see. They've got their front, but they've got their payers like tucked behind their ears, so you can't see them very well. And well, they're talking about, you see, David's sister is about to get married, but her chosen comes from Warsaw. Now, he's just heard that the chosen has just chopped off his payers. And he's got involved with sort of a more like, you know, a more progressive group. So he's rather worried. And he's discussing that about what is going to happen in that marriage now. And also there's all sorts of gossip going on here. Well, there's gossip about, I mean, did you hear that story? That story that was going around because there was this Hossam Kala come to the marriage, and what happened? A second Kala came along. And have you heard it? That's just like, because they brought the landslide of this Chosin, went back to Eastern Europe and brought his real colour. So that's everyone's talking about that. It's a complete scandal. He should be locked up. But what else are people talking about? Because it's not just like rumours that people are talking about or gossip. Chippa is in tears because what has happened for her is she's pregnant. And I mean, you know, her friends go, Mazel tov, you're pregnant. She's going, no, not so quickly. You see, I've got this really cute lodger. Lodger is not someone from Lodge, right? Translate border. Actually, I came across a song sheet, very funny, an American song sheet, where it had the word lodger and then in brackets it had border, which I thought was very sweet. Okay, so people are whispering and chatting, but then they might be doing it quietly. They're not doing it so quietly in the actual theatre. This is the front cover of a satirical magazine called Der Bloffer. And Der Bloffer, that was published between 1912 and 1914, has wonderful front cover pictures and lots of poetry and lots of satirical verse. So we have here, what do we have here and what's going on? We have a rather stereotyped couple of people on the stage where not very many people are watching them because you don't really go to watch the show in the Yiddish theatre. We've got some chicker lads up there in the gallery. We've got an orchestra that, believe me, aren't really keeping time. And we have no seats. We only have beds. And on the beds are canoodling couples. So this is coming out in 1912 in Del Bloffer. So don't tell me that no one was talking about sex or no one was talking about sex in Yiddish. Of course they were. When you look back in history, you have to remember that people are people and they're just like whoever we are. So they have a lot of the same worries, the same concerns, of course, the other concerns as well that they have. So, a little bit of extra context. This is the English music hall. In the English music hall, there is no censorship. So, in the theatre, the English theatre, there's censorship. In the musical, there is no censorship. However, if anybody complains, if you go away today and one of you then complains about me and about the slightly edgy material that I'm doing, they will come and they will inspect the music hall. If they inspect the music hall, they come and they say, that wall needs to be replastered, and no, you should have 4 stairs there, not 3. And the people who are running these music halls are doing it on a shoestring and they can't afford to, and it shuts down music halls. So what happens is that there is some self-censorship. And the English music hall is really smartened up. Or is it? So this is a little tricky, it's a slightly tricky academic sentence here, but I think it's terribly important to get at. And I'm not going to read it to you, it's by Peter Bailey. And he's a historian here in the States, a British historian, and he talks about what the issue is. If you cannot anymore say rude words on stage, then you have to do other things. You have to intimate it, you have to suggest it. And in fact, that suggestion then creates a different relationship between you and the audience, because I say something funny and then go, yeah, It's the communication between us, it's not just the words. Everyone knows what we're talking about, but it's not really being spoken. So what I thought I'd do was I'd look at maybe what that's like in the Yiddish music hall. And here we've got a little piece from the Yiddish music hall. Let's see if we can fill in the gaps. Wenn die Musik spielt also süß, heben die Maiden die Fies. Ich sage euch, es ist eine Pracht, zu verbrennen in der Nacht noch in Dancing School. Okay, it's a thing called, a song called Dancing School. Rachel hat lieb zu springen, heuch in dem Dancing School, bis ich aber kommen nach Geschwollenem, boy in der Dancing School. Well, you're all wrong. Because you see, it's a bit like this. Mary had a little lamb. she also had a duck. She put them on the mantelpiece to see if they would fall off. There you go. Wenn die Musik spielt, also siehst, heben die meiden die hands. If they kick their feet up, you can see their knickers, right? So you can't have that. So we're lifting their hands. Rachel liegt zu springen hoog in den dancing school, bis die hat einen gesprollenen Fuß. Schoolboy humour, right? Schoolboy humour is happening in the English musical, it's happening in the Yiddish musical. But this isn't something I'm actually interested in, although what's interesting is it still makes you laugh. But it's not something I'm interested in because it doesn't really do what I want as a historian. What I want is to look at where sex is mentioned in songs and sexual contact and prostitution and domestic violence, and to see what it tells us about the world of these immigrants. And so that is what this talk is going to be about. And one of the songs that I've come across is a song called London hat sich übergekehrt. London is turned upside down. And it's a song that tells you about all the things that are different about London. You come here as an immigrant and everything feels just weird and strange. And a number of these things concern sexual mores. So we're just going to read, actually I'm just going to sing it to you. I think I've got the whole thing here, so you can read it as we go. But I need a bit of help, so I'm going to sing London, and you're going to sing London. Let's try it. London, 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 hat sich übergekehrt. London, London, hat sich übergekehrt. Higgledy-piggledy, gibberish, London, London, oi London, hat sich übergekehrt. London ist nicht wie es ist einmal gewesen. Ich in mein jungen Jahren hab du's keinmal gesehen. Als unter der Erde vor der Top of the train. Aber so life nun fällt. Du wohnen Menschen wie Hering in der Fass. Für den Arbeiten so schwer wird die Erde so blass. Du lebst da jeder gewiss von Potatoes und gefreiter Fisch. Und London hat sich übergekehrt. London, London, hat sich übergekehrt. London, London, hat sich übergekehrt. Gibberish, London, London, oi London hat sich übergekehrt. London is nicht wie es ist einmal gewesen. The landlord raised the rent and the dentist that saying the Yidden speak English so no one can verstehen. Die Sportsters spielen offen fair. Wer geht du in die Häusen, die Lady sich wett? Der Mann schläft auf der Erde and the lodger in the bed. Die Meiden seien kalt wie Eis und du sie aber weiß, als London hat sich übergekehrt. London, London hat sich übergekehrt. London, London hat sich übergekehrt. Higgledy-piggledy, gibberish, London, London, oi London hat sich übergekehrt. La 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 die Mädels haben Kinder in die Weiber, das ist gekränkt. Und jede grüne hat im Stieb a telephone. Okay, alright, so that's the song, and you can see all the lyrics there about sex. So we get a nice first verse, it's nothing to do with it, it's just about things changing, and then we have who, let's see, I think I've highlighted the words about who wears the trousers. Okay, so there's something about roles are changing in London, but we're still making it as a comic thing. The husband sleeps on the floor and the lodger in the bed. We'll talk about that a bit later. The single girls have children and the wives, whatever a krenk might mean. Who knows? Whatever. Nothing, something, a disease. Who knows? The thing that I put in blue, though, is what word?
London.
London. Because all of these things are about London. And now London is going to take the blame for all the good things, and it's going to take the blame for all the bad things. And some of the bad things are about bad sexual behaviour, and this is going to be about London or about Englishmen. And this song is called A Boy Chick Up to Date. And this song, and I'm just going to do a bit of a translation for you. These songs come up, these are Yiddish words. Well, no, they're Cockney-Yiddish words. A mesher, this is a masher, which is apparently a suave, sophisticated person, a man. A toff, a sort of upper crust, yeah. A goo-goo, someone with goo-goo eyes. A bluff, someone who maybe is self-assured. A tancer, a brand, a firebrand. An Englishman. A boy chick up to date. Now, what's an Englishman? Well, we'll see what an Englishman does. And the way what we're looking at is the way being English is the thing that is the problem. The problem is not being an immigrant Jew. The problem is being English and what that does. So I'm going to just sing you the song and then we'll actually have a look at it in more detail, or a bit of it. Mein fine Lizzie Clough hat gearbeitet in a shop ganz weit up the town. In jeder cent wo's verdienen sie hat gekent, fleg sie saving in the bank van der Dan. Sie hat gewiss das Sach, jeder Bocher will sein reich. Das ist gewesen ihr ganzes Ziel. Aber als ihr wird nur haben, a Bankbuch, a Groben wird sie nehmen, a Bocher wie sie will. Oi, der Bocher gewalt. Der Soche hat sie sich getracht und gefreit. Oi, a boy, ich will. A boy, chick up to date. A mesher, a toff, a goo-goo, a bluff. A boy, chickle wie im Pussig steht. A Tänzer, a Brand, an Englishman. A boy, chick up to date. Und Gott hat sie beklickt und hat sie zugeschickt. A Boychickle, an Antik. A Boychickle, a Sport, geheiratet bald im Court. Gedei sie so mit Herren sicher sein. Aber jetzt sollt ihr sie gesehen. Als sie ist nebach, grün und gelb. Bei Patsch habt sie euch, als sie geht sie ran. Patsch geben kann. An Englishman, a boy chick up to date. So what's happening? What's happening in terms of thinking about bad sexual behaviour and England? Now, first of all, what you'll notice is, where is this song set? Have a look at the first few lines. Where is this song set?
Uptown.
Uptown. Is it set in London?
No.
No, it's set in New York.
Yeah.
Now, the interesting thing about this is this was printed, this was published about 3 or 4 times in England. I haven't seen this published in a New York publication. But it's certainly set in New York. But it's about an Englishman. It's about, that's what's going to happen if you marry an Englishman. If you marry an Englishman, it's going to put you back to black and blue, or green and gel in the Yiddish. And it's, again, saying the problem here is England. And we can see it's actually a cautionary tale. It's a cautionary tale to not marry an Englishman, but in particular not to marry, we don't just mean an Englishman. We mean a goy. Yeah, so it's not to marry a Gentile Englishman, because that's what's going to happen. So it's a cautionary tale, and at the same time, it's telling us something very specific about the fear that people have, the worry that they have about Englishness, and about that process of Anglicization, that we might lose something really important. We might become assimilated. we might become too English. And the culprit isn't only Britain, but the culprit is actually immigration in itself and coming to England. And many people, and you will be very familiar with this story from here as well, that many people are coming over from Eastern Europe and they're saying, I'll settle down, I'll make some money, and I'll send back for my family, and I'll bring them over. And of course, sometimes that doesn't happen. And it doesn't happen because they come to England and they suddenly go, hang on, I had a wife and 3 children. I had a really, really hard life. I don't even get on with my wife. And men disappeared into the 160,000 people who were living in the East End of London, the Jews who were living in the East End of London. It's going to be easy to disappear in that sort of population. And this was obviously a common thing. As you see, this is an advert from a newspaper, someone looking for her husband. And it was reflected in songs in the music hall. So the song by Joseph Markovits, Die Brievenach von Russland, tells the story of Chaya Sora, who is in Russia and is writing, saying, getting more and more upset with him, saying, we haven't heard from you. Where have you gone? Oh, go to hell. You've got London luck. We're stuck here. Your children are crying. And the very, very poignant chorus. Oi, die Brievenach in Russland, seien viel mit Leiden, viel mit Schmerz, als man nimmt der Brievenach in die Hand, auf Sticker, wird zerrissen durchs Herz, viel mit Weinen, viel mit Tränen, gefreilich Wort wird ihr nicht hören, in die Brievenach in Russland. So people in the musical, they're hearing this. 1 minute ago, they were laughing at the lodger on the floor, the husband on the floor, lodger in bed, and the next minute, they're crying at something that they see around them that is like hard. And I think the musical works that way. It's a cathartic place where you're whizzing through from being, from crying about something to laughing about something to thinking about something. And one of the ways that let me just reach to here. One of the ways that the songwriters had was to create a sort of shtetl in London, or that they could then bring their Eastern European into, and describe London as a shtetl. And this is Victoria Park. And I have to say, all the pictures of Victoria Park of this time that I could find, and there were only about 4, they all had children in them. The song isn't really set up to be sung to children, but there you go. It all had children in them. And Victoria Park was on the edge of the East End. It was a place where on Shabbos it was quite a long walk. You could have gone from the East End. It would have taken you maybe half an hour to walk there. And the Jewish Chronicle said it was black with children. And what they meant is all the yarmulkes. They looked like just lots and lots of black spots over the park. It was Israel Zangwell calls it the playground of the East End. And this song also says London's being praised, Victoria Park for Victoria Park, and everyone is either sitting down, relaxing, or falling about, and they're falling over, and their teeth are getting knocked out, and snot's coming out of their nose. It's a lovely song. It's not bad. And here we've got Yuzka with Rachel, and she's got a shoe and him a sock. Who knows what was going on there? And Nachman Bear's with his wife, and they're all looking for a job. Okay, I'll sing you the second verse, and need a little bit of help. I go, ya-da-da-dee-da-dee-da, you sing Victoria Park, Victoria Park. I sing, ya-da-da-da-da, you sing in Victoria Park. So I'll just sing you a verse. So it goes, Jutka geht mit Rachel Zwock, Victoria Park, Victoria Park. Sie erschien in Erazok, in Victoria Park. Nachman Bear geht mit sein Weib, Victoria Park, Victoria Park. Und dann soll sichern dort der Job, in Victoria Park. Dort geht Chaite, am Uit fin Litter. Sie ist die Dritte, sie wohnt in City. Die Ruite Benny, die grobe Annie, gestippelte Fanny in Victoria Park. Am Madel zit sie und sie gehen Victoria Park, Victoria Park. Ihr Gossen will sie dorten zijn, in Victoria Park. Liegt auf dem Gras, gehen wir Holz in die Victoria Park. Herz beten und Kischen in Glätten, dann will wir heiraten, bloß Kern und Schatten. Der Hosen ist dicker und sie ist schicker und sie haben beide fast in Victoria Park. In the bushes, I think. Okay, so that's the song. Now, when I came across this song, that last verse was actually collected by someone who remembers someone singing it in the musical, and they must have been singing it in the musical a little bit later than the original that I then found in the National Library of Israel. Because when I found the original song, and I was delighted because I'd only ever seen this song, I've only ever heard it from someone collecting the audio, it had a different last verse. And whether it was the censorship or what, I shall now sing you, and I've never done this in public before, the last verse, but I might have to explain it. Should I sing it first or explain it? Let's
Sing it first.
I'll sing it first. So it goes, Dort geht Reb Itzig, reibt dem Smitschig, sein Nose ist spitzig, weil heißt Itzig. Dort peddelt Meier, Foile Eier, drei für a Zweier in Victoria Park. So there we have Itzig, who's rubbing his bow against a violin, right, playing with his bow. Only Smitchik is actually slang, like dick. And reiben does mean to rub or could mean to scrape. Reiben sich is to masturbate. So we've got, this is 1902 or something, yeah. Actually, this one is even a little earlier, this song. So these are the words that people are really singing to people in the musical. And when Meyer is peddling Foiler Eyer, Eyer is also a euphemism, isn't it? Not eggs, is balls. So you've got like this language that, I mean, I was saying to someone, couldn't really sing that today. And they said to me, what are you talking about? Have you heard the lyrics to rap music? I mean, you know, we're certainly singing worse stuff than that today, but the fact is I think what is interesting is that this is being sung at the turn of the century, and they have to find a way of keeping those boys in the gallery, like, you know, entertained, because what was happening if they were not being entertained, and this was in the London Standard and other newspapers, they were ripping up seats, they were throwing them around, there was quite a lot of violence in the music halls, so you really had to be there giving people what they wanted and what they needed. Okay. One of the things I've not yet mentioned in this song is Chayita. Chayita is from Lithuania. She's the third and she lives in the city. So, living in the city. We've got three things we're told about Chayita. Other people have been, like we've got Red Benny and Fat Annie and Poxy, whatever they are. People have been, I've got an adjective to describe them, not usually nice. Chayita has no adjectives. So this is not a negative thing. She's from Litter. Okay, she's from Litter. She's the third. The third what? We're not sure. She lives in the city. Well, in the city of London, people didn't live in the city of London. The Jews lived near the city of London, but nobody lived in the city of London. It had been prohibited for many years, but since then nobody had lived in the city. If you're living in a city, you must only be really a high-class prostitute. So they're the people who lived in the city. And die Dritte, the third, Eve, tell us. Die Dritte, from Drei Schwestern.
Yes, Drei Schwestern. You've got the youngest sister. There are three sisters, and they're living in Leicester Square. And the first one is selling the most innocent thing.
Geef.
The second one is selling the shoelaces, and the third one is selling herself.
Okay, so from a poem way earlier by Winchevsky, which was very popular at the time, there are three sisters, and the oldest sister sells herself. So it's saying she's a prostitute, but it's not really making any comment on it. Now, there is absolutely tons of stuff going on about prostitution in the media, and what's happening in the press. So we have here the maiden tribute of modern Babylon. And this was an undercover report that was written by William Stead, who was the editor of the Pall Mall Gazette, and he went undercover to try and buy an underage virgin girl because there was a complete scandal of what was going on in London, and he wanted to raise the age of consent from 13 that it was then to 16. So he's going undercover doing that. We've got here, I mean, we'll all know God of Vengeance by Sholem Ash. We've got, this is, I just threw in here, it's a more recent book, but it's actually talking about the white slave trade, and that, of course, is also discussed a lot. So we've got up there Schwester, someone looking for their sister who thinks that they've seen them in some dodgy company. We've got music, here we go, Die Drei Schwestern, and we've also got often Strand, which is about child prostitution. And we've got Ormveus del Mammon, which is also about child prostitution, and Das Lied Room to Let. And the song Room to Let, the story is that the landladies are really upset because lodgers have decided that they're not being treated very well, so they're going on strike. So the landladies have to advertise for lodgers, and they have to say, look, you're going to get the best of everything. You're going to get the best room, you'll get the softest bed, you'll get pillows, and you'll get kisses from the daughters. So, you know, there are things that, yeah, and all the lads would uproariously be laughing at that dodgy stuff to be singing. And dodgy really is the name of the game, though, when you're talking about this material. But I want to just concentrate for a minute on the lodger. Oh, Lodger's such a nice young man, such a nice young man is he. So good, so kind to all the family. He's never gonna leave us, no dear, no dear, no. He's such a good, goody man. Mama tells me so. That's the English music hall, and the Yiddish music hall isn't that different. In the song Gewalt, es ist a schlechte Zeit, help, it's a terrible time, a young wife of an older man has a lodger for fun. In the song Der Job, the husband goes out to work and the lodger rocks his baby in the cradle. In the song Heim Zurück, back home, the lodger doesn't even pay rent, gets the best steak as well as the sexual favours. In the song London Not Übergegert, as we've seen, the husband sleeps on the floor and the lodger in the bed. And in the song Free of Charge, the lodger gets the nicest room in the finest bed, and when the husband leaves the house to buy the lodger some wine, the wife gets her tiddly on tom tom, totally free of charge. So the lodger it's a very interesting character, because these are all the songs that it comes up in, but it's a precarious, it's precarious being a lodger. There were many, many lodgers in London, and if you know, young men would come over, they had no other way of doing it. But it was quite difficult because they were going into a situation with a family, and everything was on the family's rules, and it was quite a hard time. You know, you were unsettled. You didn't know sort of whether you could afford to pay for it, and if you didn't get enough work, what would happen, and people were making jokes about you. An interesting thing, just as an aside, is I don't know if anyone's read The Ragged Trousers Philanthropist by Robert Tressel, but it's a British book written at this time, and it's about a story of a whole load of painters and decorators, workmen, and in this story, one of the wives gets pregnant by the lodger, and what is very, very interesting is that the sympathy in the book is both with her, because she's taken in and looked after, and also with him. That there's sort of like people are there going like, this happens, you know? So obviously it happens all the time in the music hall, and it doesn't happen all the time in life, but it's happening sometimes. And it's, the thing about comedy is if it was never happening, it wouldn't be funny, or it wouldn't have something for you to connect with. And the fact that it is happening occasionally is what makes it so real. But the lodger is used, and what also I'm interested in is how is this being used? So what is it being used to say? And in this song, Freg kein Katchanas, it's being used to say something very specific about what is happening to religion, and what is happening to religion in England. And we've got Orthodox people coming over, and in this story we've got a greener, a new immigrant, and he's there. And I have to say, I left my hat in Toronto, I'm afraid, or you'd have me having a black hat in Payers. And you've got a from man, and young man, he's come over, and this song is about what is strange for him and why it is hard for him to maintain his orthodoxy. And the first verse tells us that it's hard for him to maintain his orthodoxy because he has to work so hard to be able to make enough to eat. And if you're not working for a Jewish master, or even sometimes if you are, he has to work on a Shabbos. So it's actually really difficult to know what to do with that. The second verse takes us into slightly different territory. I'll sing it the second verse again. A kosher edel bin ich mir, hab noch gewisst fin Bücher, in a Chayrit, a sie zu sein. Hat mir Gott in England sie geschickt, a scheine Ische, for a lodger bin ich zu ihr an. Aber hoi wei bin ich gewein rein fin alla Woines, aber hoi wei hört der Himmel geschrei. A weg sie der Arbeit, der Mann wie gewöhnlich, hat sie nimmer machen zu mir, feulich eindelijk. A witzele, a kitzele hab ich geschleppt zu sich, so der Emes, es hat gehabt der Ruhe. Wenn der Mann ist gekommen von der Arbeit, hat gesehen, der Chuben, was ist du geschehen? So we've got a story where the sexual content is being used. So it's a very obvious gag, but it's being used, and it's being used specifically to tell us something about the way religion is and what's happening to religion. So it becomes like a device. And I think that's, so when you're looking into the songs, and as a historian trying to find out what's going on, you're saying okay, how is that being used as a device? What's it really trying to say? Okay. I've lost my thing. How are we doing? All right. So I'm going to just do one final song. And this song, I think, is of particular interest to what is going on around sex and sexuality in the music hall. And it's the story of a man who's trying to keep his family and is particularly trying to keep his wife happy. And the name of this song is Was geht's nicht daheim, sorry, Gittel. Now, does this name ring any bells for anyone? Won't you come home, Bill Bailey? Won't you come home, Bill Bailey? Won't you come home? Yeah, I do. Lovely. So what's the story about? The story about Bill Bailey, yeah, who's out gallivanting. Okay, let's have a look at this. In a schöne Zimmernacht geh ich mir vertrachten, treff ich mein Weibel wie ein Teufel, wolkendick bei Nacht in Regent Street. Sie's mir nicht geht, ausgeschnitten so weit, in winkt sie in Geleit. Nu, frag ich euch, sie ist doch gleich ein Bruch ihr dorten seid, und ich auf Kurs, bin Ballebus. Gehst nicht heim, sorry Gittel, sie muss lebst dir a tun. Die weißt, dass ich hab fein Spaß. Sich zieht sie mein Mittel, wo sich such, weh dir, wenn ich wär in Kass. Ich zerbrech dir a Bein, hack aus deinen Zehen, mach find dir a Bild in a Frame. Da folg dir mein Plan, weil ich bin dein Mann. So Gittel, besser geh heim. Oh, sorry, Gittel. Sorry, Gittel. You're being so embarrassing out there, gallivanting with all the boys. Gallivanting with all the girls. You know, sorry, Gittel, that we're looking at you and laughing at you. And so I get to be looking at us and laughing at us. Oh, sorry, I get to you're looking at me and laughing at you. Man sucht als mein Freund, zieht oft so, wenn ich bin in Stieb und sie lieber schon gesinnt und goi, nur was allein. Siehst du schön, in der Publikhäuser ist du's gewesen. Ich hab allein gesehen, als mit ihr haben getrinken Bier. Sehr schön. Hab gemacht, Gewalt, geschreit im Wald. Won't you come home, surrogate? Oh, won't you come home? You know I'm not that kind of lad. Listen to what I tell you here from my tone. It all goes wrong when I get so sad. It's a bertie, Rabbi. I call it dein Erzählen. Mach find dir ein Bild in der Frame und folge schon mein Plan, Mann. Ich bin dein Mann. So ein Gittel besser gehen. So ein Gittel besser gehen. So ein Gittel besser gehen. So what's that about? Why are they doing this stuff of making men look daft on the stage? And I think that if we see the music hall as a place which allows you to have cathartic experiences, we can have a look at this and say, well, where is the catharsis here? So let's go back. We've got immigrant Jews coming over, and they're coming over because they can't make a living in Eastern Europe. And they come over and they can't make a living in London. So their wife has to go to work or take in work. And they still can't make ends meet. And they bring in a lodger and they still can't make ends meet. So they are really struggling. And for the man of the house, his position has completely changed. He feels like he's in danger. His masculinity is in question, his position as the head of the household, his position as the wage earner, and he feels really bad about that. And then he goes to the musical and he sees such a Nebuch on stage, and he is in so much a worse position than him that he can laugh at that. And what about women? So what's a cathartic experience for women around this? So a woman goes to the musical and they see Sarah Gittel gallivanting off with whoever she chooses. And they think, I'm at home. I'm bringing in work to do at home. I'm looking after the household. I'm bringing up the children. And I have time to go off and have an affair. So we've got comedy that we can put on each side. And I think that that sort of cathartic experience is really where using these sort of sexual expressions sort of give away those emotions to come out. And what is particularly interesting is it's in a slightly different way to the English music hall. So where the lodgers are, what we looked at in the English musical, it doesn't have that same sort of punch, because when you're an immigrant, then there's a slightly different edge to it. So I'm happy to sign copies of the book today. This CD, I'm afraid I only have 6 copies or something of it. There is some of the songs from the music hall, and you've been a lovely audience, and I'm very happy to answer questions. Thank you very much. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious. If you compare the